Thank you. Our first briefer is Mr. Pavel Volkov, a journalist and human rights activist from Ukraine and a native of Zaporozhye. The Kiev authorities held him in a pre-trial detention center for over a year simply because he revealed the truth to his readers about what had been happening in the special military operation. Павел, предоставляю вам слово.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you. Good morning to you in New York. I am a Russian from Ukraine, and I was born in Zaporozhye. I am a journalist. In 2014, I was filming the referendum in Donetsk. And in 2015, I reported for the Russian mass media from the front line. After the Minsk agreements, I returned to Zaporozhye. In 2017-18, I spent 13 months in a Ukrainian jail, where I was first in danger of receiving a life sentence, and then after requalification, up to 15 years of imprisonment. There are two charges against me: separatism, and this is because of several publications describing the reasons for and outcomes of Maidan, and terrorism for my reporting work in the Donbas. At the same time, all of those who were in my reporting stated the following: what we want is peace. We just want to make sure that our city is no longer shelled. The security forces of Ukraine brought ultra-right people into my proceedings. They threatened me, they intimidated my family, my lawyers. After 5 years in court proceedings, turned out that everything that I had done was not a crime, that the Constitution of Ukraine gives me the right to express my viewpoint, even if it is not to the authorities' liking. But no, I was thus prosecuted illegally, but no one was punished for that. And opposition viewpoints in Ukraine were being prosecuted and are being persecuted still. One can have different viewpoints about the reasons for the war, but you cannot overlook the fact that today in prisons, in jails throughout the Ukraine, there are thousands of people who are there in jail for political reasons. And that clearing up the dissenters is something that the Ukrainian special services call stabilization activities. And as a result of that, it's not that everyone ends up in the official places for detention. Up to 2022, international organizations recorded at least 5 secret prisons where citizens who had been arbitrarily detained were kept without being charged, without following any other kind of legal procedure, where they were being tortured and humiliated. After 2022, the most famous such jail what was the gym of the Special Forces of Ukraine in Kiev. And there, the opposition was beaten until they confessed, And this was prior to being officially placed under arrest. If I had not left my home and then my country 2022, I could have become one of such people. In 2013, under the accusation of state treason, only one case of criminal proceedings was begun. After the Maidan victory in 2014, a large scale of series of citizens' arrests began. Those citizens who were critical of nationalism, of Ukrainization by force, of glorifying the Nazi collaborationists during the Second World War, who were against seeing in law enforcement and the authorities the extreme right-wing people from the street, who were against closing down of Russian schools, against economic blockade and the shelling of Donbas. If you study the court decisions, during the study of the court decisions in the course of my travel through Ukraine in 2018-2020, I was a reporter and human rights defender. And I saw that the evidentiary basis that came from the prosecution was very weak. Hundreds of people were charged under separatism and terrorism. And this was because they would lay flowers at Soviet monuments, provide humanitarian assistance to children's hospitals in Donbas, or organize events having to do with Russian culture. After Zelensky was elected president of Ukraine, between then and the beginning of the conflict in February 2022, the scope of political repression went down, but the arrests themselves did not stop. For example, in 2022 in Kherson, a Russian language teacher, Tatiana Kuzmich, was jailed because she was conducting Pushkin balls with children. After February 2022, the situation for the Russians who expressed sympathy to Russia but were citizens of Ukraine who express anti-war sentiments or had family or friendly connections in Russia, worsened drastically. Today, in Ukraine, thousands of people from 16 to 85 years of age are deprived of their freedom because of the what is considered to be improper likes and posts in social networks, for being in correspondence with their relatives in Russia, for discharging their professional duties, teaching, for example, in those territories which were first taken and then left by Russian forces. After the withdrawal of the Russian forces from the Kiev, Kherson, and Kharkov Oblast, thousands of citizens were detained, those who had been distributing Russian humanitarian assistance, those who worked as mail deliverers, as firefighters, ambulance drivers, municipal service workers, who taught Russian in schools or institutions of higher learning. For example, entrepreneurs from Kherson, Alyona and Dmitry Dubrovsky, were arrested because under Russia, what they did was they collected garbage in the city. And the entrepreneurs from Kiev's Oblast, Alexander Harchenko and Anatoly Miruta, were jailed because they distributed humanitarian assistance to people from their village. Inna Lysichenko from Kharkov Oblast was detained because she was a school director. 5 years of detention was the sentence to Valentina Vrapalo from Kharkov Oblast. And this was because she headed a municipal enterprise in Kherson. The Ukrainian security forces seized a doctor, Svetlana Medjuricka, because she had provided health care to Russian soldiers and provided medications to Kherson hospitals. In a number of cities of Ukraine, the so-called language patrols are crisscrossing the streets, and they take those street vendors who sell books in Russian. They also find people when they sing songs in Russian. The analysis of information from the prosecutor's office, prosecutor of Ukraine's office, covering 2022-2025, shows that 376,000 criminal proceedings were started related to the conflict. A guilty verdict was issued to under 28,000 proceedings. Suspicions were issued, in other words, political persecutions were begun against 20,000 people. More than 12,000 sentences were handed down, and detentions, in other words, became political prisoners, and that covers more than 2,500 people. Many of people who have opposition tendencies were just forcibly disappeared. My friend, for example, Nikolai Sidorenko, he's a reporter from the part of Donbas that is under Ukrainian control. There is a huge issue having to do with the right to a fair trial. And it has to do with the fact that lawyers decline to provide protection for political detainees. And this is done under pressure from radicals who are threatening their life. And some legal specialists do not do their duty because of a political bias. Many judges understand that the sentences that they hand down are illegal, but nonetheless they do hand them down because they're afraid of the Ukrainian security forces and right-leaning radicals. The issue of political repressions in Ukraine is the subject of my reporting human rights and scientific activity. And in this short statement, unfortunately, I cannot dwell in detail on that. I cannot dwell in detail on the statistics. I cannot tell you the stories of those who suffered or those who were tortured in pretrial detention and in colonies. But I stand ready to share this information with anyone who is interested. The organizers of the meeting have my details, and I call on everyone regardless of your political views, to not remain indifferent to the fate of the innocent people. Some of them perish in prisons, and others are just not in a position where they can wait for justice for years, as was the case, for example, after the Pinochet regime in Chile fell. This kind of practice has to be stopped right now. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.